Today's daf is daf Peiches, but we'll begin much earlier on Pei Zayin Amid Beis with Omar of Yehuda Omar Shmuel. The line begins right in the middle of the Amud with Eitzel Mitzvos. Omar of Yehuda Omar Shmuel. So we have a lot of taros. We'll see what we could do with it. Kol Mara Admumis Mechaprim. So the question is, when you have dam that needs zrika al gabi mizbeach to generate the kapara, and the dam got mixed up with other liquids, then according to Shmuel, everything depends upon the mara meaning the shade, and that means that if it has the shade of dam, then it's considered dam. And it's royal zrika umachshirin. Dam is one of the seven machshirim that if it falls on foodstuff, that foodstuff becomes susceptible to tuma. V'chayovim bekisui, and the status of the dam generate as dam once it has the admumis generates the chi of kisui. So the Gemara says that two out of these three are obvious and well known. Maiko mashmal and mechaprim tnina chayovim bekisui tnina. So we have mishnayos that we've quoted already in the past, that the dam, once it has in this mixture the admumis, then it's royal mizbeach, and that the dam generates a chiyuv kisui. So Gemara says, machshirin itzrichle. We need the chiddush of Shmuel as far as machshirin is concerned, because that we don't have a source for that. That the dam still retains its status of dam as a machshir. And the Gemara now rejects this. The Gemara says, "Machshirin nami." I don't get it. Mimonafshach. I don't need to define it and classify as dam. I dam machshiri machshir. If you're going to say that because in this mixture of dam and mayim, the dam dominates, fine. But I mayim, and if you're going to tell me there's more water in here, and the dam doesn't really have any impact, and there's no reddening of the water, then achshui machshir, mayim is also one of the machshirim. So no matter how you split the cake, whether you call it dam or call it mayim, makes no bit of difference. Lo tzricha, why do we need this? Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, shetimdo b'megishamim. So we have halacha the following, that any water that was deliberately put into utensil is a machshir, but rainwater that fell from the heavens into a utensil and they fell by themselves, there was no intent on the part of the person to benefit from the rainwater, then it's not a machshir. So therefore, we have to really determine if there was a mixture of dam and megishamim that fell from the heaven without any maisa or any kavana and intention, whether or not it's considered dam or mayim. Gemara says, but megishamim nami. Even if I grant you that it's rainwater that got mixed up with the dam, kaven the shakil v'rami achshavinu. What happened? He took the vessel into which there was rainwater and dam, and he poured it. Once he pours it, that mixture, then he is megaladas. He indicates his intention that he really wants the rainwater, and that should be enough to make the rainwater into water as a machshir. Lo tzricha shenispedu aleim. The case is where he didn't mix actively the dam and the rainwater, but rather the rainwater fell and from Shomayim, and the dam somehow got kicked. The pail of that was holding on to the dam got kicked in to the Megishamim, and he didn't do anything to be Megala Das, to demonstrate his will and his intention to have use from this rainwater. Now the Gemara says, you know what? I have another way in the name of Rav Asi Minahar Bil to explain what Shmuel was coming to teach me. And that is B'tzilata de Dama. So now we have a whole sugya about something called Tzilata de Dama, which literally translates as blood serum. Now, what is blood serum? Again, we really should check, the AI for this, but it's some sort of clear fluid of blood. In other words, it's not thick and dark like blood. It's thinned out and it's clear. And when you have a clot of blood and it starts to coagulate, then apparently this blood serum, which we said was a clear fluid, comes exuding out of the clot of blood when the clot of blood coagulates. The clot has a dark red color, but the serum around it is not dark. It's kind of yellowish. So Shmuel is coming to teach me that if it retains a shade of red, and even after it's mixed with water, it still retains that shade of red. That's called the admumis of in this case, the blood serum. Then it's a machshir. Rav Yirmi Difti Omar, Onush Koris. The chiddush here of Shmuel, according to Rav Yirmiyah, is that after you have this mixture, and the question is, the Torah prohibits eating dam, and you get kares for eating dam. Now you have this blood serum, which got mixed in, according to Rav Asi, together with mayim. Then you went ahead and you drank it, or ate it, and you get kares. That's the chiddush of Shmuel, according to Rabbi Yirmiyah. So the Gemara qualifies. The Gemara says, "V'hudika kazayis." You have to make sure that your kazayis of dam that you ate, which generates a chiv kares, is not made up of blood serum, but rather it's made up of the original dam. So although the blood serum originates from blood and it has a shade of blood, it doesn't generate kares unless you have a kazayis in the mixture, a kazayis of pure red blood that gave the reddish shade. Now, the question here is, what exactly is the chiddush of Shmuel according to Rabbi Yirmiyah? If you already have a kazayis of pure blood, then for sure you chayav kares. So that's a subject of great discussions here. It would seem that, at least according to one interpretation, you could be chayav kares if the blood serum itself is a kazayis. Not everybody agrees with that, but that would tell me why there's a big chiddush. And that would mean that even though the blood serum is thinned out, but since it emanates from real, full-fledged, healthy blood, therefore, if you eat a kazayis of this blood serum, which we called timdu, we called it tzilulata, yichayev kares. V'masnisa tana, we learned in a brayso, mitamim bi oel, that the status of this tzilulasa didama is such that if you are under a roof just with the tzilulasa didama, just with this blood serum, you contract tumas ohel. But the Gemara says that can't be unless hu de'ika revius. When there's dam min mace in a roofed tent, then someone who enters the tent contracts tumas mes, but only on the condition that there's a revius dam. And here in this case that we're extending that to the blood serum, it's silulosa dedama, once again, you have to make sure that you have a revius of that silulosa dedama. Now, how did we come up with revius? After all, we're not drinking this blood. It's blood from a corpse. And you entered into the roof of this, where this blood is located. But the answer is that according to Chachamim, if a person is dangerously losing blood and his life is out on the line, then what kind of bag of blood that we give him a blood infusion would save his life? It's got to be at least a revius of dam. Tanan Hossam, now we're learning a Mishnah, and it doesn't tell you exactly where this Mishnah is. I think it's in Masechet Tvul Yom, we'll see. Kol mashke hames tahorim. If you somehow remove from the corpse of a dead body urine, or let's say in the case of a woman, you get milk, those are all mashkim that come from a corpse, and they're not metame. So even though you came in contact with them, you still remain tar. The only liquid that came out of a corpse that's metame is dam. V'chol dam admumis shebo metame b'oel. And now we again have this Mishnah about this blood serum that came from coagulated blood, and it's thinned out, but it has the admumis, it has the redness of dam. Then it transmits tumas ohel if there's a revius of that blood serum underneath the same oil. Umashke hameis tahorim. How could you tell me that all these liquids that came out of the body of a corpse are tar? Ureminu. What are you going to do with the Mishnah in Tvul Yom that says that mashke Tvul Yom, right? A Tvul Yom is someone who contracted tumah, and the next day he'll be tahar, and on that day, before sunset, he went into the mikveh, and he needs what's called Herev Shemesh, and after Herev Shemesh, he's fully tahar. And now, what happens with the liquids that come out of the body of a Tful Yom? Because we said that a Tful Yom is still Tomei, even though he went to mikveh until Hariv Shemesh. And Mashke Tful Yom Kimashkin Shenogeh B'hem. So we're talking about liquids that emanate from the body of a Tful Yom, such as saliva, urine, teardrops, blood, in the case of a woman, milk. They are treated, they have the status of any liquid that was touched by a Tful Yom. What does this mean? So now we start today's daf. Ve'elu ve'elu ein mitamin. None of these liquids will transmit tumah through maga, because the halacha is that liquids that come in contact with a Tful Yom are unaffected by that maga. They remain tahar. And now we're saying that the liquids that come out of the body of the Tful Yom have the same status as those liquids that came in contact with the Tful Yom, which we said remain tahar. Usha'ar kol atmeim, bein kalin ubein chamurin, mashkim ayotzim kimashka hanogeh behen. Now, with regard to other categories of tumah, because we just learned a special, unique halacha to Tful Yom, then it doesn't matter whether or not those other tmeim are more severe than in their level of tumah than a tful yom, or less severe, lighter, any liquids that emanate from them are like liquids that touch them. So what's the contrast here? Again, we're learning very profound sugyas and taras here between a tful yom and other tmeim. We said that in the case of tful yom, mashkim that come out of their body have the status of mashkin shenogea b'hem. And it seems that there's a special halacha in tful yom. It's a kula in tful yom. That is, tful yom touches mashkim. They remain tahor. And therefore, the status of the liquids that come out of the body of the tful yom have the same status of liquids that came in contact with the tful yom. But in other tmeim, maybe we'll give examples later, Tommy Sheretz and so forth and so on, then if they came in contact with Chullin, then the Chullin becomes Tomei. And now, if any liquids would come out of the body, let's say you open up a sheretz and inside there are liquids, those liquids will contaminate through maga in the same way that the sheretz itself would metame b'maga, as opposed to a tful yom. V'elu ve'elu tchila. So tchila means a rishon l'tuma. So in other words, if a liquid comes out of any tameh, with the exception of a tful yom, then anything that comes in that anything comes in contact with that liquid, or if the tumah itself came in contact with the liquid, it becomes a rishon l'tuma. What that means is that it could touch something else that becomes a sheni, and then the sheni touches something else which becomes a shlishi. There's even a revi, but that's only as far as kodshim is concerned. But anyway, so what we have is, let's say, a sheretz. A sheretz is called an avatuma, and it comes in contact with a liquid which becomes a rishon l'tuma. Okay, now we have sugyas. One of the most difficult sugyas in Shas is at the end of the first parak in Shabbos. It's called Rav Chanina Skan Kohanim. Anyway, in that sugya, the Rabbanim made a very interesting gzera that if a liquid touches a sheni l'tuma, it becomes a rishon l'tuma. Okay, I don't know if we'll have to know that or not, but let's just point that out. Chutz min hamashke shu avatuma. Okay, so anything that's tameh like a sheretz and it has liquids in it, those liquids that emanate from a sheretz, chutz min hamashke shu avatuma, that mashke is considered an avatuma, which means that an avatuma is metame odom v'kelim. If it's less than an avatuma, then it contaminates ochlin mashkin, but not kelim, not odom v'kelim. My kalin umay chamurin, my lav kalin sheretz v'zav v'charmurin mes. We just finished saying that the liquids that come out of a mess, out of a corpse, are not metame, but here you see that it says kalim is a sheretz and a zav, chamurim is a mess, which means that the liquids are tame, and they're a source of tumah to transmit tumah to make a rishon l'tumah. So you see that liquids coming from a dead body are metame. Lo. We're going to reinterpret it. Kalin sheretz, chamurim zav. We're dropping mess. And why? Because as we said before, liquids from a corpse of a human body, like urine or milk, are not mitame. But if you compare the tumah of sheretz to that of a zav, sheretz is called kal relative to zav, which is called chamur. And again, we're leaving tful yom on the side. But in these cases of a light or a severe degree of tuma, meaning whether it's sheretz or zav, then any secretions that come from a zav or a sheretz are tame, but not the case of a corpse. Maishna zav de gozu beirabona, maishna mes de lo gozu beirabona. Right, we said in the case of zav, all of the liquids, secretions that come from a zav are tame. What about a mess? Why is a mess different? So Gemara answers zav de lo bedili inshimine gozu beirabonan, but mess de bedili inshimine lo gozu beirabonan. When you see a zav, you kiss him and you hug him, and people are not on their guard. They're not aware of the fact that they are coming in contact with a zav. Zavim are all over the place. This, by the way, is relevant today to whether you're allowed to go up on the Harabais. I don't know if you're aware of this whole to-do about this in my shul in Ramat Beit Shemesh. That's all they talk about the whole day, whether you're allowed to go up on Harabais or not. Because basically, we're all, I wouldn't say we're all, but many of us are Zavim. And a Zav is very severe on the Harabais. Anyway, but that's very common. So to have a Zav is common. You have a contact with a Zav, as we said before. But with regard to a human corpse, it's so repulsive, so to speak, that people don't, generally speaking, come in contact with the corpse. Now, what about a sheretz? Apparently, a sheretz is not poshet because people avoid contact with a sheretz. But somehow it's in between. You know, a zav, there's a lot of contact. A mess, a corpse, there's no contact. And in the case of a sheretz, it's somewhere in the middle. Okay, now we get back to Kisi Adam, which after all is the subject of this parak. Dam hanitas v'shalasakin. So if, let's say, after you shechted the animal, some blood spurts onto a keli, or the knife itself that you use for shechita has a residue of dam on it, then you have to get the dam off that place, off that kli or the knife, and you have to do Kisi Adam. Tana Rabbana, we learned in the Brisa, v'kisahu melamed shedama nitas v'shalasakin chayav l'chasos. So this is what's called a klal, that the Torah used the word kiso, and we assume any blood needs kisu. Omer Rabbi Yehuda Amos said, but this has to be qualified. Bizman she'ein sham dam elahu avol yesh sham dam shalohu potum ilachasos. So you don't have to bury every single drop of blood that came out of a chaya or an oaf. And therefore, if you have an ample volume of dam other than the dam that's on the sakin, and you could be mekayim the mitzvah of Kisi Adam with that dam, you don't have to start scraping off the dam from Caleb. And the Gemara is gonna explain this. Tanya, either we have another brayso v'kiso malami shekol domo chayv l'chasos mikana omru dam hanitas v'el gapayim chayv l'chasos. So we're talking about the throat of the bird or the deer that was shechted, and there's dam on the throat. And the Bryce is pointing out that dam requires Kisi Adam. Omer Rav Shimon Gamliel, Bamed Dvarim Amurim Shelo Kisa HaNefesh, Aval Kisa Dam HaNefesh Potem Ilachasos. So we'll see in a minute that there are three different shitos. Now we're studying the shita of Rav Shimon Gamliel. We'll make a summary of all three shitos in just 2 minutes. And according to Rav Shimon Gamliel, there's a difference between Dam HaNefesh, which is the dam that when it leaves the body of a chaya or an oaf, that's it, that's kaput. And therefore, you want to know whether or not you have to scrape the dam off the knife or wherever it's splattered in order to be Mekayim Kisui, or you can just do Kisui with other dam. So we had two deos, and one day it says, no, you have to, under all circumstances, you have to bury all the dam. That's the Tanakama of this price. So all the dam, that means you have to scrape off all the dam that splattered all over the place, got stuck on the knife. According to another shita, all you need is, let's say, a kazayas dam, whatever the shear of the dam is for kisui, and that's it. You don't have to worry about the splattered. And Reb Shimon Gamliel says it all depends. What dam do you have available for kisui? That's going to determine whether you have to clear off the dam from the knife. If the dam that you have available for kisui is called dam hanefesh, it's the lifeblood of the creature, then you are mekayim the mitzvah of kisui adam with that dam. And he's arguing lakula against the Tanakama. The Tanakama said that all blood requires covering. So let's just ask the question, Maiko Mifli, meaning what are the biblical drushos here? And then we'll summarize three shitos. Is Rabbanan Savri Domo Kol Domo, meaning you have to cover all the dam. Rabbi Yehuda Savar Domo Afilu Mixas Dam, meaning just find any dam that's available. It doesn't matter whether it's dam tamtzis or dam nefesh, and cover it. And that's it. You don't have to run around scraping off the dam from the socket. That requirement of dam that's absolutely critical, without which you not fulfill your mitzvah, is the dam hamiyuchad. What's dam hamiyuchad? That's the dam hanefesh. So now we summarize the three shitas. We had two brises. In the first brisa, Rabbi Yehuda says that all you need is to cover some dam. That's it. In the second brisa, we have two opinions, both of which disagree with Rabbi Yehuda, and both of which disagree with one another. That's the Tanakama, who says that, what are you talking about, Rabbi Yehuda? You're saying that all you need is a little bit of blood and you become the mitzvah, forget about all the rest of it. No. All the blood, the kiso means that all the blood has to be covered, domo kol domo. And then we have finally the shita of Shimon ben Gamliel that under all circumstances we have to cover the lifeblood, the dam hanefesh. And with that, we exempt ourselves from running around looking for other dam, meaning dam on the sakin or dam shenishpach. Interesting. The Chassam Sofer has a whole new perspective on Reb Shimon Gamliel. We thought that Reb Shimon Gamliel was telling us that, you know what, if you can cover the lifeblood, then that's what you do, and then you yotze the mitzvah of kisei adam. If you can't, there's no lifeblood available, it all got carried away by the wind, then start scraping off the dam from the socket, etc. The dam that splatters. Comes along the Chassam Sofer and he says the following. You know what Reb Shimon Gamliel is addressing? He's talking about a case where he doesn't know whether or not he covered the lifeblood, the dam nefesh. So the reason why he scrapes together all the other dam that's splattered, etc., is because the hope is that the lifeblood is somehow mixed in together with that dam, so that when he does a kisi on that dam that's splattered, he will ipso facto be covering dam hanefesh. All right. Now we get to the Mishnah. Just going to take a little drink here. Char? Right. So the Mishnah says the following. I found this Gemara very fascinating because you could look at a table like I did on Shabbos, and I saw all sorts of things on the table. Some were metal, some were plastic, some were glass, and I was wondering if I could pulverize them and grind them, make them into a dust, whether I could use them for kisei adah. Mechasim bezevel adak bechol adak, fine dung, fine sand. We'll see about the sand in the desert. Besid ubecharsis, lime and ground pottery. Bilavena ubimegufa shektasham, you grind a brick or an earthenware cover of a cask. Aval ein mechasim lo bezevel agas. So now you have something, I call it a brick. You can't use a brick for kisei adam. You can take the brick and you can grind it and make it into a dust. So therefore, if you have zevel adak, hagas, excuse me, you have coarse dung, coarse sand. You have a brick and you haven't broken it down and ground it, or megufa, a cover of a cask, as we said before, that was not crushed, then it's not valid for kisi. It's not enough, as we have a sugya in Psachim with regard to finding chametz on Pesach, that you just cover it over with a kli, and then after the yontif you burn it. But covering over a dam with a kli is not a kiyum hamitzvah. It's got to be dust or earth. Davar shemegadol bo tzmochim mechasim bo she'ein megadol tzmochim ein mechasim. So if you take a substance and you grind it and you make a dust out of it, you make like almost like earth out of it. We'll see about ashes later on. Can you plant anything in it? So I don't know. I was thinking to myself, if I would take a metal spoon, I don't know what, and grind it down and make a powder out of it, I don't think you could plant anything on that. But we'll see in this Gemara that it's not so pashut. For example, you can't plant anything in the sand of a desert, and yet we know there are things that grow wild in the desert. Is that called planting? Is that called whole plants that grow? Hechi domi chol adak, Omer Rabba Baruch, Omer Rabbi Yochanan. Kol she'ena yotze tzorch lekotsha. If you have sand and you have someone who makes pottery out of earthenware, out of sand, can this person, this expert, make some sort of fine dust-like substance without having to put in the effort of crushing it? The sand is already crushed. Ika demasila seifa. Others have it in the Mishnah Sefer. Aval ein mechasen lo bezevel agas lo b'chol agas hechi domi chol agas. Omer Rabba v'setchem neim Rabbi Yochanan kol shahayotzer tzorch lekotsha. When is this substance? We had these cases of dung and sand. When is it excluded and invalidated for kisui? Because the yotzer, right, this professional person who creates earthenware, has to crush it. In other words, in its natural state, it's not really fine sand. So if you take a look at the two Lashonos, in the first Lashon, he's saying that we only exclude it because ein hayotzer. I'm sorry. We only validate it for kisui because ein hayotzer tzarich lekotsha. I mean, that's a high demand. That in its state, you can make pottery out of it without even grinding it. It's so ground in its natural state. But in the second Lashon, we're only going to exclude something where the potter has to crush it. So, my benai, what's the difference? Ike benai de tzarich v'lo tzarich. The mifrich ifruche. So the nafkamina, the machlokas, is going to apply in a case where you have a substance, let's say this dung or sand, which can be crushed by hand. He doesn't need a utensil to crush it. He'll just crush it by hand. That's how soft it is. And it goes according to that. According to the Lishna Kama, the only sand, in order for you to qualify as sand for Kisi Adam, it's got to be something that doesn't require any human intervention whatsoever, not by kli and not by hand. But according to the second Lishna, at what point do we disqualify sand? That's when it's so coarse that you need a kli in order to crush it. But if you could crush it by hand, then it qualifies for Kisi Adam. Tana Rabbanan, we went to the Brisa, V'kiso yochel yichasenu ba'avonim. I might think that since the Torah says cover it, take a stone, a brick, and just cover it. Or yichpel of hakli. Or maybe it means that the Torah wants to get the blood out of sight. Maybe it's an aesthetic kind of thing. So just cover it on top with a kli, a utensil. Talmud Lomar, the kiso be'ofar. We need a substance that qualifies because it's defined in the Torah as ofar. Wait a second. We just said in our Mishnah that fine sand, again, whether you need a little bit of a hand to this or it's natural fine, you can make pottery out of it. Or for that matter, fine dung is valid. I mean, that doesn't fit this description of ofar. Is that ofar? Ein li ela ofar minayin l'rabos zevel adak v'chol adak u'shchikas avonim shchikas karses. Let's say you take a stone and you grind it, or you take some sort of pottery and you grind it, or neoris pishton daka, right? You have the chaff of a flax. That's what they used to beat the flax until the chaff goes. And that chaff is kosher for Kisi Adam, but it's not ofar. So for that, we're going to need a ribui in the pasuk. And that's what we're going to see now on Peiches Amid Beis.